everybody, it's Frankie-Lou. I'm coming to you today from the Grow Together homestead here in Springbank, Alberta, where I am answering some of your burning questions about winter sowing that you guys sent to me this week. I'm hoping this will make you feel a lot more confident about taking on this wonderful method of seed starting. I apologize for not being able to produce a live here this week. Living rurally is wonderful, but sometimes Wi-Fi just doesn't work. So this is the best thing I could come up with. If your question wasn't answered today, do continue to send them though, because I will do my best to answer as many as possible. The number one thing that I've been asked this week by gardeners, particularly in Alberta, so people from the Wintersowing group on Facebook, plus from Calgary and Cochrane, are all asking, oh my gosh, the temperatures are so erratic this week and they're so warm. Can I still go ahead with my winter sowing? And the answer to that question is yes, because right now in this region, zone 3, end of February in the southern Alberta region, and also I am following a very similar schedule up in the Golden Homestead as well. You should really only be planting your hardy perennials right now, because those are the ones that require the most stratification, and those are the plants that are most adjusted to these erratic temperatures that we live in here. Yes, you can go ahead and continue planting. I am going to be continuing planting this week. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of hardy perennials right now, and I wanted to be doing it outside because the temperatures are wonderful. It's 10 degrees out there today. It's beautiful, but it's so windy. That's the thing about living in this Chinook zone. The temperature rises are lovely, but sometimes it's so windy that you can't actually function. That's what we got going on here today. Lovely sunshine, lovely warmth, lots of wind. So in order for you to be able to hear me and all my little supplies here not to blow away, I have to do this inside here today. So yes, you can still plant this week, which is the last week of February here in Alberta. You could still be planting up your winter sowing jugs, but make sure you're still sticking to your hardy perennials, because if you were to switch now, if you were to start trying to plant some of the things that are a little more tender, their seed coats don't tend to be as hard. They could potentially germinate. It's unlikely because our temperatures at night are still hovering around 0 and freezing temperatures at night, which means that you're not going to see any germination from those hardy perennials yet. They're going to want to see a little bit more heat more consistently before they pop. But some of those seeds that germinate quickly naturally, don't be planting those right now. I'm not putting radishes out, I can tell you, because those radishes could easily germinate with some of the temperatures that we're seeing. Another thing that you might want to do, I'm not going to bother doing it myself because I did do this test last year. I put jugs on both the north and the south side of the house to see if that made a difference with the erratic temperatures. And I found that the ones that I put on the north side of the house did maintain in their snow a lot better, and they did maintain frozen a lot longer. But then I ended up having to move them anyway to the south side of the house when spring came because they just weren't getting enough sunshine. So I am still, with these jugs that I'm going to plant up today with hardy perennials, I'm going to still place them on the south side of the house. I'm going to group them all together so they're all nicely insulated with each other. They will freeze at night and then insulate each other and stay frozen. And I will continue to shovel snow on them. And that will help to keep them, as long as I do have snow, and that will help to keep them well insulated and stopping from germinating too quickly. Now, if you are still finding this a little bit, it's your first time and you really are not feeling comfortable about putting milk jugs out with these warm temperatures, that's okay. You could still get away with waiting like a whole other month. You could wait a whole other month before putting anything out and you still will do fine. The only reason I'm doing so much right now is because I have a lot of planting to do, several hundred jugs over the next couple of months. So I need to do a little bit at a time, which is why I am starting to put my hardy perennials out now. But I could wait until the end of March if I wanted to, and they'd still be fine because we're still going to get enough stratification between the end of March and when we finally get our last frost and everything's starting to come up nicely. So yes, you could wait. If that's going to make you feel more comfortable, you go right ahead. I did not start winter sowing my first year until it was the end of March, and I had wonderful results. So if you got a lot to do, or you're just really itching and want to get your hands dirty, get going with your hardy perennials now. But if you're like, I'm not feeling comfortable with this, then wait, that's fine. This is not supposed to be stressing you out. The whole reason you do winter sowing, in my point of view, is so I won't get stressed out, because it's so easy. It takes care of everything for me. So that leads to another question, which is about timing, because a lot of people want to take breaks during March and April. They want to go away on vacation. That is one of the main reasons I started winter sowing, is I was so tired of setting up beautiful seed trays of plants and seedlings inside and leaving them to the tender mercies of a paid neighbor or friend, and then coming home and everything is either too leggy because they didn't fiddle with the night lights enough, or everything's dried out. Milk jugs, you don't have to worry about that. You set it and forget it. Once they're out there, you really only have to deal with them every once in a while. So I know a lot of people are trying to time their milk jug planting for their vacations. And so I would still try to stick to, as much as possible, only planting hardy perennials until the first or second week of March, planting your hardy veggies throughout the month of and your hardy annuals throughout the month of March, and then going for your tender stuff in April. So, but if you're planning to take a vacation in the middle of March, maybe wait and do it all at the end of March, because you still got lots of time. You see that? I hope that makes sense. Please let me know if it's not clear enough, and I will let you know. And then I also get asked often, well, why are you still milk jug planting since you have such a beautiful greenhouse to work with at your other homestead in Golden? And now I rely on it even more, because I live half time in two different provinces. Having this so I can leave my plants alone for a week at a time and knowing that they're going to be fine. I don't know if I could do it if I had left them, if I'm always leaving seedlings to somebody else to take care of while I'm away. I'm a bit of a control freak, believe it or not. And having my milk jugs taking care of my plants for me so I don't have to rely on somebody else to do it makes me feel a lot more comfortable. So I hope that answers that question about timing and vacations. You do not want to be putting out tender stuff now. All right. And if you have to wait until the end of March, that might be a better idea, to wait until the end of March if you're going to be going away in the month of March. And if you're going away in the month of April, then you want to get your tender stuff out so that it can be taken care of while you're away. Stuff is not going to be sprouting for a couple of months. That's another question I get asked so often. How can you put stuff outside because it's freezing temperatures out there? Yes, that's what we're looking for. We want those freezing temperatures to cause the cold stratification. We don't want anything germinating too quickly. That's actually our biggest issue here in Zone 3, is stuff germinating too quickly, and then we have the cold temperatures. A lot of people who do winter sowing all over the world, and it was invented by a wonderful woman named Trudy Davidoff quite a while ago, and it's been used for a long time. But those people tend to be working in warmer climates where they can start putting stuff out much earlier. We actually, I have personally found over many, many years of doing this, that where I do the best is by holding back a bit, because we do have longer winters. So stuff is not going to germinate too soon for me and then die in my crazy early spring conditions in March and April. They're not going to germinate till later, and then everything will be ready to go in the ground when I finally do have ground warm enough to put seedlings in. All right, so those are some of the timing questions. Okay, so another question that I've had quite frequently is, what shouldn't I winter sow or use milk jugs on? And honestly, over the years, I've decided that nothing is off limits. These milk jugs are awesome propagation chambers. And even in my wonderful greenhouse, I'm using these jugs still, because I find that I get a much better germination rate by starting them in here. I do use seed cells for some things, but most of the seed starting that I am doing in Golden in the greenhouse is still in milk jugs. One of the main reasons for this, as well as has the wonderful humidity trapping properties of this, makes for good germination. It's also easier to move these around. Once they're taped up, I can move 4 to 6 jugs at a time without causing any damage to my seedlings. Whereas if I were to be carrying trays of seeds, I'm going to drop and I'm going to kill some seedlings. So that's one of the other reasons I really like the milk jugs for propagating, is it's less, I'm likely to cause it less harm, a seedling in a milk jug than in a seed tray. So yes, even peppers. The best shishito peppers I've ever grown in my entire life were last year in the greenhouse. I started them though in here, and then I transferred them into their pots. With some of the hotter peppers, I've found over the years that the hotter the pepper, the longer it tends to take to germinate. So I would even place, if I was growing some really, really hot peppers, I would place these milk jugs on top of a heat mat to get them going. Okay, and then with my plants, other heat-loving plants like tomatoes, cukes, and squash, I do that cheap method, which I describe in one of my videos if you look on the playlist. And that is for the month of April, which is still less, it's more work, but for the month of April, I take these and put them outside when it's beautiful and sunny and warm, and I bring them in when it's cold. Because they're sealed up, it's less work than hardening off. If you hate bringing things in and out, and that's one of the reasons you want to start winter sowing, it's a lot easier to bring jugs in and out than it is to bring trays in and out. So I still do my tomatoes, cukes, when I'm going to be putting them in pots in milk jugs. I just bring them in and out for the month of April, depending on how intense the cold is outside. If it's going to be when it's going to be below freezing, I do bring them back in and I just place them in a sunny window until it's time to go back out. So marigolds is a question I get asked a lot. I have found my best success with marigolds has been with milk jugs, but I wait and I plant those later. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have a big full blooming plant when it's time to go into the ground, but boy, because they are hardy, I find that they do better when they're started in the milk jug. Big water cooler bottles like this. So I use these for winter sowing in place. Basically, I do the drainage holes and I use this dome lid, and this is where my marigolds, they loved being in here. And then having them on, I didn't have to transplant them as well. So I guess, but the secret with marigolds is waiting until later. Do not try putting marigolds out now. You want to be doing that in April, very end of March at the earliest, beginning of April. Okay, another question, is seeds rotting? I've had a lot of people questioning about putting their winter sowing stuff out and they're finding that it's rotting. I would say that it is almost most definitely because they're not getting enough drainage. You do have to ensure that you are putting enough drainage holes in the bottom of your milk jug. I see people putting just 3 or 4 and thinking they're going to be okay. I literally put 3 in each quadrant on the bottom of these milk jugs. And then I also, when I feel like it's overkill, it might feel like overkill, I also put a couple more on each side, just there. Because these will rot for sure. They trap humidity, they hold humidity. That's one of the reasons why it works great. And if there isn't a way for excess humidity to come out of the bottom, yeah, you will for sure get rotting. And you also might get a little moss on top. Usually that little bit of moss on top isn't a problem, but rotting, yeah, that's a problem. Another thing that I've seen people do, and yep, it's going to cause rotting if you do it, is they place their milk jugs in trays so that they're easier to move. But if it's a solid tray and it doesn't have a way for the excess water to drain out the bottom, you will have rotting milk jugs that won't work. So yes, it's okay to use a perforated tray, like a garden center tray that you get your little seedling packs in. Those are like a mesh, so there's going to be good drainage. But if it's something that's going to retain water at all, you will definitely get some rotting in these milk jugs. So on that same vein, I want to talk about underwatering. I see a lot of people spraying and using hose and spray to water each of their jugs. That could end up with an overwatering situation, and also you could end up inundating and crushing all your young little seedlings when they come up. If you have prepared your milk jugs with a whole lot of moist soil, like you want that soil to be this, I'm using Pro Mix Organic Herb and Veggie. That's the one I usually, you want that soil to be holding together, okay? It should be so moist that it's sticking together. So if you've got pre-moistened soil and you have placed your milk jugs out where they have a lot of exposure to snow and to rain when it comes, you should not have to water more than a couple of times before it's time to open these babies up. And I've had people say, well, if it's frozen solid, then the water's not going to be able to come up. If it's frozen solid, it shouldn't need to be watered because your soil should already be watered enough. I only water my milk jugs when they feel light. Okay. If they're heavy, that means there's enough moisture in the soil that's in there and you shouldn't have to water it. I find that I've damaged seedlings when I've attempted to spray from the top. So, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time to individually make sure that these get enough water. Alternatively, by bottom watering, I can pick up 4 to 6 of these, place them in a nice tray that's got a couple of inches of water in it, let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes, and come back. Do something else. I'm not babysitting them, and then come back and move them out and move other trays in while I'm doing other things. And I just find it's a lot less work, which is one of the reasons I winter sow, is because I don't want to be babysitting something and I don't have to with the underwatering. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Drainage is absolutely essential for maintaining proper moisture balance in there. And I would also suggest, if you don't want things to rot, making sure that they're placed somewhere where they will drain, not in a tray, but place them in a tray to water them, in an underwatering tray to water them. Take them out of that tray once they are moist enough and heavy again. I hope that was clear what I'm trying to say there. And if not, send in another question and I'll try to explain it a little better. Will the plants be smaller than if they were grown indoor under lights? And are there any cheats available if they want to get things moving along, particularly if you have access to a greenhouse? Because people can see that I'm greenhouse growing and I'm still doing this. And yes, that is a cheat. And I will do a whole other video about that cheat because I'm cheating with that right now. I took some hardy perennials jugs that I planted up a month ago, and I put them out in the snow to stratify. I brought them in to the greenhouse a few days ago because I know that those hardy perennials, my sorrel, lovage, some poppies, stuff like that, were sitting out in the snowbank for 4 weeks. They've gone through some good stratification. And now that I brought them into the warmer greenhouse, that's replicating spring, they are going to sprout sooner, and I can now repot them in once they start to do that, and they will grow on faster. So if you do have access to a greenhouse and you want to grow some hardy perennials and get them moving ahead and get further along, particularly if you're hoping to get blooms for your first year with a hardy perennial, this is a cheat that you probably had a 50-50 chance of achieving if you do this. So here's the cheat. You take your milk jug, you fill it up as usual, you stick it out in the snowbank with the hardy perennials in there for 4 to 6 weeks. Then you bring it into the greenhouse and it'll replicate spring, and you will get your sprouts much sooner. You could pot them up, which, you know, you only want to do this if you want to cheat. This is just for people who really want to get big plants ready to go in the ground when it's time to, because you will have to harden off if they're not planting. You will have to go through the hardening off process. So it's a cheat that only if you really want to get some larger plants ready to go into the ground. Yes, start them outside, move them inside after 4 to 6 weeks, pot them up, harden them off before getting them in the ground. Usually for those of us in zone 3, we're looking at the end of May, beginning of June, and you could have some really nice big plants to put in the ground at the end of May, beginning of June. Okay, so then I've had lots of questions about various tools. So I'm going to talk about tools that I love to use and tools that I've moved away from. So number one's, I guess it's not a tool, but it is something that I use a lot. I use on each of these jugs is my soil. I'm going to say once again, if you want the set and forget it, you don't have to worry about pre-mix anything yourself. And it's pre-mixed, so you don't have to mix anything yourself. My Pro Mix Organic Herb and Veggie, that's my favorite blend, okay? Because I am growing all edibles. I have used, because I wanted to test it, their regular blend for containers. And it works well as well. Like, so if you're only planting flowers and you don't care if it's organic, you're not going to be eating it, then yeah, their container blend works great as well. You want something that has enough fertilizer in it to sustain those seedlings until they're going to go into the ground. If you're just using straight peat moss, that is probably not going to sustain your plant long enough. You're going to have some very, very sad, unhappy seedlings when it gets time to put them in the ground. The number one marker I found that's been able to maintain the writing on here are these ear tag markers, okay? You go to get that from a feed store. It goes on those cattle ear tags. This stuff will last through any of our harsh zone 3 conditions because it's meant to. It's very fumy. I suggest only using it outside because otherwise you'll get very lightheaded very quickly. And they're wonderful. They're pricey, but they do last a long time and they work great. Don't use a Sharpie. I know for those of you who watched my earlier videos, when I was doing it with Angus as a little kid, I was using Sharpie like crazy. But this stuff will not last in our harsh zone 3 conditions. So you don't want to be using Sharpie. The second best pen, which is kind of like a happy medium, I found are the acrylic paint pens that you can get from Michael's. But I honestly don't worry too much about it anymore anyways, because my number one hack that you don't have to worry about what kind of marker you're using for is cutting your tags out of these yogurt containers. There's whole other videos for that if you haven't seen it on how to do it. Oops. And you'll see, even if I use a Sharpie marker, I'm going to be doing poppies today, so I'm going to write poppies in here. If you create a tag that you then, and create your tags in advance, you see how there's this hole here. If you pop your tag, so it goes up into that hole there, you can read it from the outside. So this marker is not being affected by the external conditions with the sun beating on it because it's being protected by this nice translucent covering here. And you're also not having to deal with snow and rain and hail. And this will last. You'll be able to read this even if it gets hit by a monsoon. So that's my number one thing. I don't worry so much about what markers I'm using anymore since I started doing this. I don't know if any of you guys saw that I did a video earlier this week where I was testing different kinds of tape. Because duct tape is wonderful. I'm Canadian. I love duct tape. But when you're doing milk jug planting, you have to be using good stuff. Do not try to use the dollar store duct tape. It's not going to stick. And it also won't work well if you want to be planting outside in cooler conditions. When you go to use this initially, that adhesive will not adhere if it's cold outside. Sometimes I want to work outside. And my brilliant partner said to me, well, why aren't you using tuck tape? So we started playing with tuck tape, and we're finding that we like this a lot more. It's a little less easy to use if you're not into using your teeth. You do have to cut it, but it sticks way better in cold conditions, and it remains sticking on even when it's really cold conditions. So the other thing that I'm finding is that I took a couple apart just to see. I know that for some folks, they find that they're killing seedlings as they're trying to rip the duct tape off because it sticks so well. This comes off a little bit easier when you want to. So there's going to be less of seedlings getting harmed and less damage to your hands. If you're dealing with carpal tunnel or something, I really highly recommend the tuck tape. I have tried standard packing tape, but I find that it does not last for several months out in the cold zone 3 conditions and the erratic temperatures. So I would stick to tuck tape or duct tape. But I have a feeling I'm going to be using more tuck tape in the future than duct tape. So I hope that that's helpful. All right, so I know that's a long one, but normally I'd be doing a 1 hour live at this time. So we're actually a little bit under the wire there. Probably because I'm not getting your current questions coming as I'm talking. So please do put as many questions as you like in the bottom in the comments. A lot of these questions are also being asked constantly on our Facebook Wintersowing group. We've got a really wonderful community of over 6,000 people who are using this method and other methods also for growing things in our harsh conditions here on the prairie. If you want to be part of a community of people who are doing that, I do recommend joining that group. And I check it daily, so there's lots of responses, and it's one group of people. I've gotten some of my best ideas from this group of folks who are all into trying and experimenting with this technique and other techniques for growing in our harsh prairie conditions. Although it is called winter sowing and planting, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, please don't feel like that restricts you. You're more than welcome to join us. We just wanted to focus on folks initially who were in these prairie provinces because we have some challenging growing conditions, but we know we're not the only ones. I love seeing people joining us from Europe, some new members from Poland, so that's pretty exciting, and other cooler places in the world, people from Montana and some of the northern states. Please do feel to join. And honestly, I've got some of my golden friends who've joined us from BC as well. I hope you don't feel that our title is too restrictive on that Facebook group. We'd love to have you as long as you come to us with an open mind and you want to try some fun and new stuff. So I hope that was helpful. Continue to ask those questions. I am going to be back in Golden next weekend where we will do another live stream from there, 7 p.m. on Saturday evening. It's not like I have a party life, but I do enjoy doing socializing with you guys over these streams. So please do join in there if you're interested in asking some hot burning questions about the cold stratifying, wonderful winter sowing method, or even about our 4-season geothermal greenhouse that we've going there, or composting. We're working on a new compost system there, so hopefully we'll have some fun stuff to show with about that. And as always, I hope you'll take this chance to grow together today. Have a good one.